might be important outside of the obvious walking. And the big toe is actually very critical in more than just allowing the foot to look like a normal foot. Its role as a counterbalance in creating this tripod of a foot, in that if we think of the foot as kind of like a triangle, you've got a big toe over here, you've got the baby toe over here. You form 2 points of a triangle and another point here, and the arch of the foot is kind of the top of almost that pyramid. And the big toe creates an anchor point for that pyramid, but it also creates a very, very important place where we can put pressure. Pressure can be accepted and we can explode off of that, creating propulsion. And if we don't have good big toe mobility, that's going to affect it. And you're going to see a lot of things come about as a result of that, from big toe pain, or maybe like turf toe, to maybe plantar fasciitis or tendonitis, or you might even see like Achilles pain, or even up the chain. If we look deep enough, we could maybe even justify some knee pain or hip pain and low back pain, kind of depending on how it presents and what your activity of choice is. But when we think about the big toe, its main role, in a very blanket statement, is to extend and to flex. And really, for us, as we're not much of climbing creatures, the flexing portion is more to create an arch and keep stable. Allowing the extension is what's going to be very, very important for normal walking and normal gait mechanics. And so if we take a peek here, hopefully you guys can still hear me. If we look at like a normal here, here's your knee, there's your enormous foot with a big toe coming off the side of it through here. As we go into weight accepting and going to push off of it, that big toe has to come back into extension. And if we are lacking that motion, we're going to see some things happen. Either we're not going to get that extension. And here, if we look at even the running more, it has to even go into more of an extreme extension range of motion. If we don't have that, what happens is that motion doesn't happen, and we give that up and take that force somewhere else. And it could happen right here at the Achilles. Okay. As that foot wants to come up and that toe wants to come up, it forces this. And because there's no shock absorption here, that force comes to here. We could justify it at the base of the big toe. So you might know your sesamoid fracture, your sesamoiditis, or turf toe could be very commonly called that as well, because that base of the foot has taken more pressure, because now we're not shock absorbing and transferring weight, we're just loading that weight with nowhere else for it to go. You might also see it at the plantar fascia aspect of that, because for the same reason, that force isn't distributed, that plantar fascia tensions up in that position. As that toe gets extended, that plantar fascia needs to tension to allow for shock transmission. But if there's poor shock transmission, we end up with attenuation of that force somewhere else. The plantar fascia might be part of that thing that gets sacrificed. And then you can even look into the calf as far as the muscles that are working hard there. Again, if we're running, and as we're seeing, if this is the hip here, and we look at the center of gravity through there, this has to go behind your body. If this is a vertical body, when we're running, the leg goes behind it. And if we don't have that motion, because we can't access it here, what happens is we get less motion that happens here, and it looks more like something here. And as a result, if your weight is still carrying forward, as if you're in a running stance, this extension doesn't happen here. It happens at the low back, and we end up arching through our low back instead of pushing through our leg to explode. And so you might see that we get more force to the low back, we get weaker glutes, because those aren't exploding. We're just using that to kind of basically lunge our hips forward, then propel our hips forward. So obviously, I guess while we're here, one of the other things that you see is as we normal walk, as we come over, we should roll over that foot. But if the big toe is stiff and this isn't allowing us to roll over that foot, a couple things might happen. Number one, it might just stop, and you see a significant limitation in the range of the motion of this joint through here, in the length of the plantar fascia, or in the length of the Achilles. The other thing that might happen is you might rotate your foot out. And what happens is that as you rotate your foot out, we end up rolling over it sideways, and that force pushes that out, and you might start to see the development. That's going to bother me if I don't put that last toe. You might see the development of a bunion, but as we rotate out and the weight transfers over that, we see arch collapse. And so you might see plantar fascia, or what people say as flat feet. And so all of that combined can create some significant issues for anyone who's, really anyone, but a lot of people who are on their feet, especially active adults. So if you guys have questions on that, in physical therapy, we address it all the time. And so things that we're doing, we're going to be doing joint mobilization, but also looking up the chain at ankle mobility, at calf mobility, at hip mobility, because it's a two-way street. If you have some but not others, you're still going to be limited in range of motion. And things we might do for that sort of stuff might be Graston technique, where we scrape you. We might look at cupping, for mobility and tissue mobility, kind of like what we talked about in our last video. And then dry needling for sure. Maybe not at the big toe, but somewhere up that kinetic chain, to see how we can get more motion and better muscle control and better activation. So as you might know, at this point, we have discovery visits. If you're interested, give us a call. You can sit down with a therapist for one-on-one for about half an hour. We do an assessment. We look kind of deep dive into all your issues and say, okay, yes, are you appropriate for physical therapy or are you not? And here's what you can do about it. Or if you're not appropriate for physical therapy, go see so-and-so, because they're going to be the one to help solve that out. So if you guys have questions, message us, email us, call us, hit in the comments, however you want to do it, and hopefully we'll see you on the next one.